Chiefs aren't playing this weekend, but there is a lot of playoff football, and all of it could affect Kansas City. We're going to break it down with Ross Jackson from Locked On NFL next.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back for another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. I am Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. You can go find me at Chiefs Corner. This is Ross Jackson from Locked On NFL and Locked On Saints. We're going to be talking some Chiefs football. We're going to be talking about really playoff football, but it's all going to affect this Kansas City Chiefs team. A lot to talk about when we get into that here in just a moment. But today is Crossover Thursday. It is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5 over at Prize Picks. A lot of different crossover episodes going on. Go check out the playoff episodes with the Broncos and the Bills, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We're going to get into talking about the Steelers and the Ravens, but we're going to start with the Chargers potentially being a third game this season for the Chiefs when they face off against the Texans. Can the Chargers beat the Texans? Ross, how's it going?
Oh, man, I'm great. I'm excited to break all this down.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I do think that you start looking at Wild Card Weekend and you're in a situation where Kansas City is just sitting and waiting. And the one thing Ryan and I talked about was how crazy is it that basically some of your starters are going to play for almost 3 weeks or almost 4 weeks, 25 days. So, I mean, it's a crazy situation for them, but getting rest and getting ready for the next round is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And I think the thing you're looking for here is like, who's going to be the best matchup for this Kansas City Chiefs team, right? And I think the toughest one might be these Los Angeles Chargers, not because I think the Chargers are a better team than the Chiefs by any stretch of the imagination, but I got a nugget and I want to, I'll share that nugget. But this Chargers team, I think, is the one that you might say, the Kansas City Chiefs want to face the least. I don't know if you agree with that, but the numbers seem to say that.
Yeah, I would say that's probably close to true. I don't like going up against Justin Herbert, and going up against any team for the third time in the season is going to be difficult.
Yep.
Divisional opponents, obviously they know you very well. Yeah, you're going to be in Kansas City. You have a home field advantage. You have Patrick Mahomes, which all that goes in their favor. But beating a team 3 times in the same season is very, very, very hard.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's the biggest thing for me going into this one is anytime that you have to do that, it is really, really tough to not only play them a third time, but to beat them a third time. We don't see it happen very often in the NFL. It happens sometimes, especially now that you have the expanded playoff. I think you're seeing it a little bit more nowadays. But I remember back in the day here in New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints going up against the Carolina Panthers for a third time in a season and them actually sweeping them for a third time. But I think it's fair to say that if you go back to that Carolina Panthers team and look at this Los Angeles Chargers team, and really if you look at any Carolina Panthers team go up against any Los Angeles Chargers team, with the exception of a couple of seasons, I think it's safe to say that the Chargers team is a better team, and especially one that's led off by Harbaugh, who is out here just like balling out with these Los Angeles Chargers.
Well, and then you look at the running game, which is a lot better than it has been in the past couple of seasons, and they have 2 star offensive tackles right now on both sides.
And they got playoff Zeke, baby. I'm just kidding. That's fine. We know that's not going to be a factor, right? Like we all know it's not going to be a factor.
Yeah, that's I can't get with you on that one. That one's going a little too far for me. But I will say, you look at this game, and it really comes down to, can Kansas City beat them a third time if they play them a third time? I think that they have the ability to. The other one that we need to talk about kind of in this same regard, though, is it also could be the Houston Texans. I mean, it could be either of those 2 teams. I mean, I'm guessing it would probably be the Chargers just based on how the Chargers have played and how the Texans have played lately. But there is a possibility it could be the Texans. It's the only matchup where we have 2 teams to talk about that could be playing Kansas City in the divisional round.
It's true. And look, the Los Angeles Chargers have a reputation for Los Angeles Chargering. So, yeah, it could very well be the Houston Texans. And I think if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, I'll give me the Houston Texans. That's
Oh,
fine. I
absolutely.
mean, like we all know what we saw on Christmas Day. We all know what we've seen from this team, and they're running out of people to catch footballs and all these other things. And CJ Stroud's taken a big step back in his second year. He hasn't been nearly as productive from a raw production standpoint to an EPA standpoint to a DVOA standpoint. I sound like Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers out here, but it's just he has taken a massive step back. And so I think if you look at like coach quarterback, which I always look at when it comes to the playoffs, it's going to be really hard to top Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, especially if you're CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah, and you mentioned exactly what I would say is that they're running out of players to be their star wide receiver or their good wide receiver, I guess is really what you should say. And that's a problem. I mean, this Chiefs offense, I'm sure you probably have caught a couple of Chiefs games over the past couple of weeks. Yeah. This Chiefs offense, obviously we'll throw out Denver. That game doesn't count. But go back to when Hollywood Brown came back. This offense is a lot different than it was earlier this season, and it's only going to get better with the addition of Brown and Hopkins now, being in the offense, knowing what's going on. And now you have Xavier Worthy, who had a good rookie season, but now can step into a third wide receiver role versus a guy that was trying to be a starter or a number one or number two for a lot of it.
He gets to be a major mismatch all of a sudden, right? Like with him moving to that third spot, you get the opportunity to move him around, especially with the versatility of DeAndre Hopkins, who can play both inside and outside. You can challenge the perimeter with Xavier Worthy, or you can challenge that physical slot corner and dare him, go ahead and get a hand on our fastest guy. And if you can't get a hand on that fastest guy, watch him fly down the field. I mean, that's going to be a huge mismatch for the team. And then, of course, you have the mismatch of all mismatches in Travis Kelce, who, I mean, is there any bigger place to have a mismatch or a bigger position, I should say, to generate a mismatch than tight end? I mean, the old moniker of too fast for the linebacker, too big for the safety, I think is probably going to be something that was signed on Travis Kelce's birth certificate. I mean, goodness gracious, like it's just going to be a mismatch central for this Houston Texas team or Los Angeles Chargers team, whichever one moves on. If they're the lowest seed going to take on Kansas City, it's just going to be absolute. I'll say heck, double hockey sticks for them to try to match up with this offense, man. I don't know where they're going to be able to do it over on the defensive side. They generate a lot of pressure, Houston does. So maybe that's a place where you can maybe create something that could be an equalizer, but you've got to be able to successfully generate that pressure.
Well, and that's the big question with Kansas City is DJ Humphries going to be the starter at left tackle? We're not going to know for another week if that's going to be the case, or they're going to keep Joe Thuney there and then play Mike Caliendo as your guard. So all that's going to play into things. If Kansas City gets their way, I think they obviously want DJ Humphries to be their left tackle because it's such a massive upgrade at left guard to bring a all-pro back in and play him in his natural position. And so I think that's a huge deal. But, you mentioned DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy. You didn't mention Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown has almost as much speed as Xavier Worthy. I know he's not as fast, but he's still a 4.3 guy. That's plenty of speed, and that is something that's exciting in this offense because when you get two of those guys on the field at the same time, the options are pretty much endless because you could go deep on either side of the field. It's not like you can just figure one of them is a chance to burn you deep. Both of them could easy.
And the compliment of having a DeAndre Hopkins that draws a lot of attention, that can take apart and pick apart the short and intermediate area in addition to the deep threats. Like it's such a perfect blend. It's what it is that NFL teams strive to do all the time. Give me the big physical guy that I can throw to in a pinch and give me the other two guys that can threaten all over the field. And oh, by the way, give me the superstar tight end and the really, really good run game as well. And the fantastic defense over the other side. I mean, it's what every NFL team strives to get. I know a lot of people talk about how lucky the Kansas City Chiefs were, and some people would say better lucky than good. I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are a very good blend of good when it comes to what they've done so far this season. I take nothing away from them for the what they've been able to do in those close games.
Well, and I will say this too. I also think that Andy Reid has been holding a lot back. I think that he has held a lot back this season, and not only just holding stuff back for the playoffs, but the fact that he didn't have Hollywood Brown, who, if you were at training camp, you saw him have a very specific role in a lot of different plays and a lot of different designs to run for him, and then to not have him the entire season until the end, I think there's going to be a lot that's going to be coming out that people have no way to prepare for because they didn't get a chance to see it at all in the regular season, and they probably went pretty vanilla just trying to get Hollywood ready to go.
Yeah, no, really, really good call there too. I mean, how much have we not seen of that? How much have we not seen of Spagnuolo's system too? I mean, there's still some of that you have to imagine that's been kind of held back. Good teams save stuff for the playoffs. They save things for the postseason. They build a lot of tendencies during the regular season so they can flip them on their head during the playoffs. I think that the Chargers can present a little bit of that challenge too, because Harbaugh has the ability to do that. He's got the experience to do that. Kevin Minter on the other side has the ability to do that on the defensive side as well. So I would watch that for Los Angeles. I think the Chargers would be the bigger challenge for Kansas City, but a lot of that just comes down to having seen and played them twice, both in close games. But I think that a lot of that really just comes down to the moniker of having to beat a team a third time. Do I think that they actually hold a candle to Kansas City? No, not so much.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's every given Sunday, so who knows?
Yeah,
Any given Sunday, sorry. So who knows who's going to win that game if that ends up being the case? But we have a lot more to talk about. We're going to talk about the Steelers and Ravens next. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and the excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature features out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming game and using the Game Time app. With Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Chiefs, Steelers could be a repeat of a game that just happened a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of crazy because the one we're going to talk about after this with the Broncos would be back-to-back weeks that the Chiefs have been playing them. So it's crazy because you look back at the schedule and obviously the NFL had no way of knowing who was going to be in the playoffs. I get all that. But you look at who the Chiefs played in the very end of the season. Obviously, they play the Browns, then they play the Texans, then they play the Steelers, and now they're playing the Broncos. Then they play the Broncos, and obviously they didn't need to play that Broncos game and win it. But you're in a situation where you're going up against three teams in a row that were playoff teams. How much are you thinking that they're going to hold back from that aspect of it? Number one, knowing that they're already in the playoffs, but two, now you look at a Steelers team that you've already played. They kind of saw some of what you do, and they did get a chance to see Hollywood, although it wasn't very much.
Yeah. Look, I think all that's fine and dandy in terms of what it is that, Pittsburgh has seen, and we have to give Mike Tomlin credence as one of the better coaches in the NFL. But the Kansas City Chiefs also steamrolled them.
That's true.
And everything. You know what I mean? And honestly, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, all respect to them, I think they deserve to be in the playoffs. I think they are a playoff team. They've done some good things throughout this season, especially navigating two quarterbacks early, that whole situation, everything like that. But I got to be honest, man. Like, while I think the Chargers would challenge the Chiefs, I'll tell you about the Broncos in a moment when we get to that. I don't think that the Steelers are even close, man, when it comes to what the Kansas City Chiefs can do, all that. I just don't see it in this one. I think that this is the best possible matchup outside of the Houston Texans, right? When it comes to a clear underdog winning one of these games and being the lowest seed, this is the most favorable matchup for Kansas City.
Which is crazy because they have two of the most fearsome pass rushers in TJ Watt and Hightower. I mean, both those guys can get after the quarterback, and it's not how often they get after the quarterback, it's how quickly they get after the quarterback.
They're
so
quick, man.
That's the big thing. And you look at Kansas City at Mahomes this year, he's been sacked a ton, and that is, going into the Steelers game, I was really worried about that pressure, but Kansas City handled it and took care of Mahomes for that game. So it's a lot different, but I agree with you. I think that if of all the matchups, this is the one I would like the most, a rematch against the Steelers. But the funny thing about it is I don't know that the Steelers really have much of a chance, to be fair, because I don't think they're getting through Baltimore.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I'll mention here real quick on your note about quick pressures and how quickly they get to the quarterback. The Steelers, according to Next Gen Stats, the only team in the NFL with 3 edge rushers that have generated at least 15 quick pressures. We talk about quick pressures. We're typically talking about getting to the quarterback within 2.5, within 3 seconds. Alex Highsmith, as you mentioned, TJ Watt, as you mentioned, and then also Nick Herbig has been able to get some of that done as well. So that's going to be kind of the big thing to watch in terms of how maybe Pittsburgh could complicate things for the Kansas City Chiefs. But if the Kansas City Chiefs get their run game going up against this this Pittsburgh Steelers team, that's going to end up forcing Pittsburgh to not be able to really pin their ears back and get after the passer. And so I think that ends up being kind of the most important level of this for Kansas City in this hypothetical matchup is actually what can you do with your run game, not just what can you do with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no, and I don't disagree. But I think the other thing that really plays into Kansas City's favor is the defense. I think that their defense going up against Pittsburgh in their offense, like they have George Pickens, who is a legitimate threat. Pat Freiermuth is a good tight end. I'm not going to say he's great, but he is a very good tight end. But they just don't have weapons outside that. They don't have the depth of weapons outside that. And Russell Wilson can make some throws that I would almost venture to say even Mahomes probably doesn't make or can't make, just because of his deep ball and his ability to hit it at different, different levels and different times. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I look at the Steelers offense against this Chiefs defense. If the Chiefs defense does what they've done all season, which is stop the run, I don't see Russell Wilson and the Steelers being able to put 300 yards and more than 3 or 4 scores on this defense, which is what it's going to take, in my opinion, if they get there. Yeah,
I'd have to say I agree with you there. Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of EPA right now, 25th in the NFL, one of a couple teams tied at where they are. Everything, they just don't generate the rushing attack that's going to put fear into anybody's system there. And so while we were talking about, and also they have the one of the lowest outputs in terms of like yards per game on the ground and all these other things too. And so like that would be a big piece of this matchup to watch. It's kind of the opposite of what we talked about, Chris, when it came to the Steelers up against the Texans, where we were saying the head coach quarterback tandem to me is what makes that game. For me, when it comes to Kansas City and Pittsburgh, it's going to be the rush offense versus the rush defense. And to me, Pittsburgh is clearly at the disadvantage when it comes to that. So I think you're spot on with that.
Well, it's going to be curious to see, can Russell Wilson show anything to get them to a place where they play Kansas City? And if he does, how can he take his game to the next level? Because as you know, playoff football gets harder and harder every single week. Yep. And it's always going to get faster. And the one thing the Chiefs really have going for them more than any other team in the playoffs, doesn't matter on either side, AFC or NFC, is they have the experience. Yeah. They've been here before. Most of their team has played in big games, and they know exactly what they're going to be getting themselves into. In any team that they play outside of, or any team that they play, period, in the playoffs, isn't going to have the same kind of experience.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great point, right? Like how many of these guys have been there, done that? And the answer is most of them, yep. As opposed to, Pittsburgh, it's gotten a little bit younger in certain areas. Now, can you see a world in which, TJ Watt and Russell Wilson come up with these heroic performances and everything, these Herculean performances? Sure, they've done it before,
right?
But I think that's what it would take, and that's the difference. I think that Kansas City, and we've seen this already. I mean, we saw this game come down to what it was, a 29-10 deficit, and it didn't feel like the Kansas City Chiefs were particularly stressing themselves throughout that matchup either.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so you had a situation there to where you have this one team that can come in with home field advantage. Oh, playoff Arrowhead. Like I was at Arrowhead week 5 when the Saints made an appearance there at GAIA. But it's just like, that environment during a playoff game, I can't imagine like that. That's such a tough environment to go in and play. And then you would have to somehow create some kind of a Herculean performance against some other people that, that play football the way that Usain Bolt runs. Like it's incredible, but it just makes it look so easy. Like, I don't know. I can't put the Steelers, I can't elevate the Steelers too much in this conversation.
No, and I get it. I mean, it's just going to be a question of, if they get past Baltimore, can they have anything left? Because
that's true too.
That's the other big thing is, this is going to be a slugfest. And like we talked about with the Chargers game just a little bit ago, this will be the third time both those teams are playing each other, and those teams, I'm not going to say they hate each other, but they don't like each other. And
it's a real rivalry.
It's an extremely physical game every single time. So if whoever the Chiefs play comes out of that game, they're going to be beat up in some way, shape, or form. And obviously with the Chiefs having basically 3 weeks off at this point, they're going to be well rested.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Here we are talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers advancing to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. We're not even sure they're going to make it past the Baltimore Ravens. Come on now. What are we doing?
Yeah. No, it's possible. I mean,
it's possible. It's 3 times, right? So we talked about before, right? It's tough to play a team 3 times. So it's there.
Well, the one thing I will say about Baltimore before we move on to the Broncos is there is also playoff Lamar Jackson, and that hasn't gone so well for him. So curious to see how that goes.
This is a big game for Lamar's legacy, right?
Huge. But he has to continue to play well and get them to an AFC Championship game or better. To continue to not have questions about his ability to play in the playoffs. But that's neither here nor there. When we get back, we're going to talk about the Broncos and how the Chiefs could be playing them in back-to-back weeks. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need from live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Go visit the website and share 2 of the 3 games in the AFC playoffs this weekend have worse odds than any other playoff game out there. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 9.5-point underdogs in this game against the Baltimore Ravens, and the Denver Broncos are 8.5-point underdogs against the Buffalo Bills. The only game that is looked at by FanDuel as being close is the game for the Los Angeles Chargers and the Houston Texans, a 2.5-point affair. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Third potential matchup for Kansas City could be the Denver Broncos, and they would be facing them in back-to-back weeks. I said this earlier when we started the show. I'll say it again right now. You can take everything that happened in that last game with the Broncos, and you can throw it right out the door because it doesn't matter.
No, nothing about that last matchup has anything to do with this potential matchup.
Other than, honestly, the only thing I will say, maybe the Broncos, the way they played the Chiefs, has something to do with it.
No,
but from the Chiefs perspective, there's nothing that you can really take from that. I mean, you could take what did they play, what did they run in these certain situations. You can look at that type of stuff, but you're not going to be able to look at it from an aspect of how'd they beat us because you're playing your second and third string. I mean, you had a guy that was basically a starter that signed six days before.
Right. Yeah, absolutely nuts in terms of that whole situation. But look, that's what happens, right? And you're in the NFL, you got a 53-man roster, you got a 16-man practice squad, but you got to dress 46 plus 2. You're not going to be able to sit everybody, so you got to go and grab people and do all this other roster, configuring and stuff like that. So it turned out to be this 38-0 shutout that no one paid attention to, right? No one is taking that to the bank going into this. And here's my question around Denver, who I will say, I think Denver does present a challenge for Kansas City because of coaching for me, right? Like I know Sean Payton and what he has done and what he can do and all those other things, but you do have a rookie quarterback. Talk about the difference between people that have been there and done it before and people that haven't. Like what a disparity between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos, perhaps the greatest disparity in terms of these matchups. But Vance Joseph over the defensive side, very skilled, very talented, very experienced. Sean Payton, very skilled, very talented, very whatever the last word that I said was. And I think that the biggest thing that I'm curious about here, though, is all the stuff that you would save for the playoffs. How much would Denver have to let loose against Buffalo first?
Oh, yeah.
So that it's not new anymore and it's all on tape by the time that they have to go to Kansas City.
No, absolutely. And then you look at it from the aspect of Denver would have to do just about everything they possibly could, probably, to have a chance to knock off the Buffalo Bills. How much energy is that going to take from them? That's
same thing we talked about with Buffalo and Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right?
Right. How much energy? How much of everything that you have are you going to have to give to be able to beat Josh Allen in Buffalo? That's a tough task. But at the same time, what I will say is go back and watch the Chiefs game we can't take away anything from it from how their defense looked or how their offense looked. But go watch Bo Nix. He played very well in that game, regardless of who he was playing against. He was hitting the targets that he needs to hit. He was, he didn't give them a chance to lose the game because he wasn't turning the ball over. And that was something that you always had to worry about with a rookie quarterback going into a game where it wasn't a playoff game, but the pressure was on because it was win or go home.
Right.
And obviously you're facing backups, but that doesn't matter. It's a question, can you get past the pressure and just play your game and do enough to make it work? Obviously, they did way more than just enough to make it work, but he passed the first test. Now, Buffalo is a completely different animal with Josh Allen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true too. And look, I'll give Bo Nix his flowers, man, because if you look at it, I mean, completing 73% of his passes, throwing 2 touchdowns, going back to week 10 in a game where the Denver Broncos were kicking a field goal for the win at the end of that game. Great special teams play by the Kansas City Chiefs. People have to realize that field goal blocks are not luck. Those are called plays where you're trying to execute something to get a free runner in there and everything. Like, that's what good special teams play does. They show up in those clutch moments. But let's give Denver their credit. They held Kansas City in that situation. They played them tough over the defensive side. Bo Nix looked really, really good in that matchup. The one thing that Denver didn't have that they absolutely needed in that game, and it goes back to what we discussed in the up against Pittsburgh, no run game. And that's been one of the biggest issues for Denver all season long, is that run game's been at best inconsistent. It cost them time of possession in that matchup. It cost them some third down conversions and things like that. Cost them some red zone possessions. You got to have your run game in the red zone, all those things. So I would look for that to potentially be something to watch. And to Denver's credit, they took the run game away pretty well for Kansas City during that matchup as well.
It's kind of funny because you go back to week 10 and you think if Kansas City loses that game, then they actually have to play Denver the last week. And it affects.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It affects Denver and Buffalo, because Buffalo would have been, having to play their entire game versus, being able to sit and Trubisky playing and whatnot. So that one win, obviously it isn't everything, but it changed how things go. And it's crazy because you talk about a field goal block as, and that happens in the NFL, but to have it be something where it walks off the game is even crazier.
Oh yeah.
And there were one of those guys.
Yeah.
There were 2 guys that lost that kick.
That's right.
Not just one. There was 2.
And that's the thing. That's why I say, like, it's not luck. It's not luck. Like, you have those, there's a phrase for them that I forget what they call them. I spoke with interim head coach here in New Orleans, Darren Rizzi, who's a fantastic special teams coordinator as well. And the Saints had one as well in New York going up against the Giants. They blocked a field goal to win the game, and they had a specific play call for how they were going to manage that. And there's a word that they use for that, a kick killer or something like that. I can't remember what it is. I'm just choosing an alliteration in that case. But there's a little section in the special teams playbook that's specifically for those game decisions and everything like that, or for those game situations and everything. And so you got to show up.
Yeah, and Kansas City actually talked about this. I don't know if it was that week or a couple weeks after, but Dave Tobe, their special teams coach, said, they were actually practicing. They weren't doing that specific play that they were going to use to win the game, but they practiced it, or they did a similar play to make sure it would work in a later situation. So they put it in and said, okay, if we do this, what's going to happen? We're not going to try to block the kick like we will if it comes down to it, but we're going to put the guy in the position and say, okay, here's what you're going to go do. See if we get what we're looking for, because that's how you get in the right position to do something like that and win the game at the end. So huge coaching on Dave Tobe's part. He's fantastic, and Kansas City doesn't get enough flowers in Kansas City. I will say that.
I love a good special teams coordinator, man. He's one of the best in the league.
It's fantastic to see. I'm curious, though, when we look at this game and we look at the Broncos playing the Chiefs potentially again. Obviously, the Broncos would have to do what nobody thinks they will and go beat the Bills. But when you look at the Broncos team, Kansas City is going to be going in there with fresh legs. The Broncos have played a lot of games and not had any rest. Most of the Chiefs, all the Chiefs will have had at least a week's worth of rest. Some of them will have had a lot more rest than that. So, I mean, that's going to play into this. But then you look at the Broncos defense versus this Chiefs offense. Yeah, they have a shutdown corner in Patrick Surtain II, but I'm not so sure that they can slow down this Chiefs offense given what they have now compared to what they had in week 10. They didn't have Hollywood Brown back then. DeAndre Hopkins was a brand new wide receiver in this system for the most part, only played a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that you said earlier that I wanted to mention about Hopkins is you have those two speed guys that can take guys over the top and pull stuff back, but you also now have a guy that you can throw the ball to in tight spaces and feel comfortable that he's either going to catch it or it's not going to get caught.
Yeah, this is going to be, and this is true anytime you see a matchup between two high quality head coaches, Andy Reid, Sean Payton. It's going to be all about situational football. What can you do on third down? What can you do in the red zone? What can you do on special teams? What can you do if you go for it on fourth down? What can you do if you're kicking with this much time left or kicking off with this much time left? Like, it's going to be all that kind of stuff. And the DeAndre Hopkins factor on third down, in the red zone, on fourth down if you have to go for it, if you need a 2-point conversion, right? That's massive in games like this. And I will put it on my podcasting career right now that DeAndre Hopkins, barring injury, will make some play like that at some important moment in a situational football situation during this playoff series, because I'm that confident that he's that guy.
Well, and you add that to Travis Kelce, who's already been that guy for the Chiefs.
It's so now funny. You talk about anybody on this dang team, and you're forgotten somebody else. That's also ridiculous. Like, it's stupid.
So now you have two guys you got to worry about. And I will say this: I'm not going to say Hollywood Brown is at the same level of DeAndre Hopkins or Travis Kelce, but Hollywood Brown does have the ability to be another guy that can be that situational football guy and step in on a third down or a fourth down and do what he needs to do, especially when you're talking about a situation where he may not be lined up against Surtain because Surtain is on Hopkins or Surtain is on Kelce. I mean, pick your poison there. You're getting Hollywood Brown on the third best cover guy, or is he going to be on Worthy, who has been playing better. And one of the things that I've loved about Worthy the past couple of weeks is you watch the rookie progression. Like a month or so ago, he has a deep ball that he doesn't catch because he doesn't get both feet down. But a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember if it was against the Steelers or maybe it was the Browns. He was 20 yards downfield. Mahomes threw him the ball. I think it was against the Browns. And he realized, I'm way past the line of scrimmage. This is third down. I'm way past the line. I'm way past where I need to be. I'm going to step up and go get the football as opposed to letting it come to me. Because if he would have let it come to him, it could have gotten knocked out. But by going and getting it, it couldn't. It's the small things that make teams better. And him learning that at that point in the season is going to play into how this is going to go for the playoffs. And now he's able to run routes where he doesn't have to just take the top off the defense. He can run crossers with his speed, which is also going to open things up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, working laterally with that kind of speed is tough, right? When you're making a defensive back chase you, those are the types of things you just learn with experience, and he's getting more experience. I'll cap my comments off with one more thing. The other thing that I think that those guys, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, have a real opportunity to take this game or take their game to another level is what they can do on those third and short deep shots that the NFL loves so much. The shot plays that teams love to call if they're on offense when the quarter ticks over, first quarter to second quarter, third quarter to fourth quarter. Defense goes over the sideline to get their Gatorade. Everybody's good. All right, let's get everything ready, blah, blah, blah. And then boom, the offense comes in and just immediately attacks coming out of the quarter break. Those are spots where that kind of speed is insanely invaluable.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait. It's going to be a fun weekend of football. Do not miss any of it. And we're going to be talking about it. Ryan and I will be talking more about this as we get ready for the game tomorrow, for all the games tomorrow. But then we're also going to be breaking it down and talking about the Chiefs opponent back on Monday. So be sure not to miss that. Ross, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Real pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
That is going to be it for us today. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.